Hey everyone, welcome back to the Incredible India podcast series. I'm Sam.
And I'm Taylor.
So imagine living in a neighborhood with, like, absolutely no formal police presence. I mean, no modern security cameras, no government oversight at all.
Right, which sounds like chaos.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yet, it remains one of the safest, most tightly knit, and seamlessly functioning communities on the planet, and it's been operating that way continuously for 600 years.
It's wild. It sounds totally impossible when you look at, how we build cities today.
Right.
But that exact scenario is a daily reality in the poles of Ahmedabad, which is India's very first UNESCO World Heritage City, by the way.
Yeah, and our mission for this deep dive is to basically unpack this centuries-old system of urban planning. We really want to figure out how these ancient neighborhoods essentially hacked human behavior to create, well, the ultimate sustainable communities.
And, why they hold these incredibly urgent lessons for city planners right now.
Exactly. So just to set the stage for you listening, if you drop into a pole today, you are not looking at some dusty, roped-off historical ruin.
I know, not at all.
You're stepping into a living, breathing ecosystem that has just been humming along since the 15th century. So let's start from the top down. How did this entire system even begin?
Right. So the foundation was laid way back in the 1400s under Sultan Shah. He had this very specific grand vision to transform the local riverbank into one of Asia's preeminent trading metropolises.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, and the pole system was the absolute bedrock of that expansion. I mean, at its core, a pole is a densely packed residential cluster, but the layout was incredibly intentional.
So it wasn't just random houses thrown together.
Not even a little. They originally housed specific trades or castes or religious groups, and they were organized around these formal trade guilds called mahajans.
So you would have an entire neighborhood functioning as this hyper-specialized district, like one entire pole dedicated just to textile weavers, another strictly for metal workers, another for spice traders, like that.
Exactly. But the true genius is actually in the street layout. It wasn't a rigid top-down grid like you see in Manhattan or, modern subdivisions.
Right.
The streets grew organically. They branched out exactly like the limbs of a tree. So you had a main arterial road, the trunk that split into smaller lanes, which then split into even narrower alleys and eventually terminated in small cul-de-sacs.
Okay, wait, I want to unpack that tree branch layout for a second. Because when I think of modern suburban cul-de-sacs or those maze-like communities we see everywhere today, they tend to feel incredibly isolating.
Oh, totally.
You drive in, your garage door closes, and you literally never see a soul. Did this 15th century branching layout isolate people, or was there some mechanism that actually fostered unity?
Well, it actually fostered an intense unity, mainly because of how the physical space was shared. In a modern subdivision, a cul-de-sac is just a dead end designed exclusively for cars, right?
Yeah.
In a pole, that layout acted as a natural physical buffer against external threats or invading armies. I mean, if you didn't know the layout, you'd get lost immediately in this tangle of narrow alleys. But for the residents, it wasn't a dead end at all.
Because of the secret passages.
Precisely. The poles were laced with these shared pathways, hidden doors between buildings, interconnected courtyards, the works.
That's so cool.
It was this brilliant balancing act. The maze protected the distinct cultural identity of each individual neighborhood, but those secret, porous borders meant communities fed into a broader urban harmony.
So you could cross boundaries without really going out into the open.
Exactly. You could walk from a vibrant Muslim quarter directly into a Jain community, and they all flowed into one another without ever having to step out onto a vulnerable main road.
It's fascinating. I mean, they engineered a way to be physically separate but deeply connected. But, a street layout only gets you so far. To really understand how this shaped daily life, we have to look at the homes themselves.
Right.
The architecture essentially dictated community behavior.
And that architectural behavior modification starts with the defining feature of every single traditional house in a pole, which is the chowk.
The central courtyard, right.
Right. If you picture these traditional mansions, they're called havelis. They are built around this open-air internal core. The chowk is the beating heart of family life, but functionally, it's an engineering marvel.
How so?
Well, it basically acts as a massive thermal chimney. The open roof pulls intense Gujarat sunlight into the home without exposing the outer walls to heat, and it channels fresh ventilation directly down into the living spaces.
Oh, wow, so it's passive cooling.
Yeah. And culturally, it created a totally private sanctuary. It gave the women of the household a secure, open-air place to gather, cook, and interact, far away from the public eye of the main streets.
Okay, so the inside is this fortress of privacy. But the outside, the facade facing the street, is doing something completely different. I really want to talk about the balconies, the jharokhas.
Oh, they're beautiful.
They are these massive, elaborate, overhanging wooden structures. And they are usually fitted with jaalis, which are intricately carved latticed screens.
Yeah, and those jaalis are a perfect example of ancient physics at work. They aren't just decorative, they actually provide passive cooling through something called the Venturi effect.
Okay, break that down for me. How does that actually work in practice?
So when a hot breeze hits that solid wooden screen, the air is basically forced to squeeze through those tiny carved holes in the lattice.
Right.
Compressing the air like that actually increases its velocity, and as it expands into the shadowy room on the other side, it cools down.
That is wild.
It's essentially air conditioning centuries before electricity.
Yeah.
And socially, those screens gave the residents a bird's eye view of everything happening in the lanes below. You could see the entire neighborhood, but no one on the street could see you.
And the street level itself is just as intricate. I mean, the ground floor entrances to these havelis feature these staggering hand-carved teak wood doors.
The detail on them is incredible.
It really is. We are talking about deep, meticulous reliefs of lotus motifs for purity, mangoes representing fertility, geometric Islamic designs, or protective symbols like the swastika for good fortune and the kalash, the water pot symbolizing abundance.
The craftsmanship is just unbelievable. The Gujarati woodcarvers achieved a level of depth and precision using basic hand tools that we honestly struggle to replicate with lasers today.
Thinking about how you just described these doors, it's basically the 15th century equivalent of a social media profile.
Oh, it really is a totally public declaration of identity.
Right. I mean, you didn't have a bio to type out. You walked past a house, and the doorway broadcasted the family's wealth, their exact religious sect, their social status, and their ancestral trade to absolutely anyone who knew how to read the symbols in the teak.
Exactly.
It was their pin post and their verified checkmark just permanently carved into the facade.
And the wealthier the merchant, the deeper and more elaborate the carving.
Yeah.
Perfectly merged high art with pure architectural utility.
Okay, so the buildings are functional masterpieces. But a building is just an empty shell without the rhythm of the people living inside it. Which brings us to what is arguably the most famous social feature of the Polsatla culture.
Ah, yes. The theater of daily life.
Exactly. So for the listener, what is an atla?
The atla is a raised physical platform that sits right outside the front door, bordering the narrow lane. If the chalk is the private sanctuary, the atla is the crucial semi-public space. It's the exact boundary where the private home bleeds out into the public street.
The daily rhythm there sounds incredible. At dawn, you have elderly women out on the atla drawing rangoli patterns, those intricate geometric designs made with rice flour, to invite spiritual protection into the home.
It's a really beautiful morning ritual.
And then, by evening, the atla transforms. It's where neighbors sit to chop vegetables, play cards, drink tea, and basically run the local gossip network.
Yeah, and during festivals, the architecture literally becomes the venue. During Navratri, those private inner chalks are thrown open and transform into dance floors for traditional Garba circles.
I'd love to see that.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
And during Diwali, every single carved balcony and ancient winding staircase is illuminated with hundreds of flickering oil lamps.
It paints such a beautiful picture. And the neighborhood also governs itself, right? Informal councils of respected elders mediate disputes without any need for police or formal authorities.
Right, completely self-governed.
Which sounds incredibly peaceful. But I have to step in and look at this through a modern lens for a second. Think about your own modern neighborhood group chats or apps like Nextdoor or hyper-vigilant homeowner associations.
Oh, sure.
We usually hate them because they feel intrusive. Isn't this atla culture just the ultimate inescapable neighborhood watch, like where everyone knows your business?
It's a very fair tension to highlight, for sure. If you're sitting on the atla, the elders are watching from the balconies, the neighbors can hear you from the shared walls. It begs the question of whether this is an incredible support system or an incredibly stifling surveillance state.
Exactly. Where's the privacy?
Well, it comes down to a fundamental shift in how we define privacy today versus how it functioned then. What the Poles perfected is this concept of privacy within community bonds.
Okay, what does that mean in practice?
The architecture provided strict boundaries. The internal courtyard gave you total sanctuary. But the moment you stepped onto the Atla, you entered a mutually agreed upon zone of observation.
So the observation was kind of the point.
Yes. Because the streets were so narrow, and because they were constantly observed by dozens of grandmothers behind those lattice screens, the environment was entirely self-policing.
I see.
Children could run freely through the maze of alleys without a single worry. The community's eyes literally were the security system. It was less about being nosy and much more about mutual survival and collective care.
That reframes it completely. The architecture physically supported a private retreat, but mandated a public safety net. And speaking of those active streets, we need to transition to the economic engine of the poles. Because remember, these neighborhoods started as trade guilds. And remarkably, if you walk through a pole today, you still have master artisans living and working in the ground floors of these ancestral homes.
This is the element that truly makes Ahmedabad a living museum. We are talking about unbroken lineages of craft knowledge, and the most astonishing part of this continuity is that this massive wealth of technical knowledge is passed down entirely through observation and participation.
Without a single written instruction manual.
Yeah.
That absolutely blew my mind when we were researching this deep dive.
Yeah.
It's like complex open source software, but the code is passed entirely through muscle memory. Young apprentices just sit next to their grandparents and absorb the rhythms.
And, the complexity of what they are creating from memory is just staggering. Take patola weaving, for example.
Let's break that down for the listener because it's a highly technical process.
So patola uses a double ikat technique. To visualize this, a loom has vertical threads, which is the warp, and horizontal threads, which is the weft.
Okay, got it.
In normal weaving, you weave the threads together and maybe dye the fabric later. In double ikat, the artisan has to visualize the final, complex geometric pattern in their head before they even start.
Wait, before they start weaving?
Before they even start weaving, they take the hundreds of raw warp and weft threads, tie off microscopic sections of them, and dye them multiple times in different colors.
So they are dyeing the exact pattern into the loose threads before a single weave is ever made.
Precisely. When they finally put the threads on the loom and cross them, the dyed sections align perfectly to form the pattern. A single mistake in tying ruins the alignment. It can take months to finish a single saree this way.
And it's not just patola. You have bandani artists doing tie-dye by literally plucking the fabric with their fingernails to tie thousands of tiny knots.
It takes so much patience.
I can't even imagine. And you have block printers, hand-carving wooden stamps, and using strictly natural vegetable dyes like indigo for blues, turmeric for yellows, madder for deep reds.
And beyond textiles, you have the metal workers doing damascening, where they take a hard base metal like steel and physically hammer incredibly fine strands of pure silver or gold into the surface to create intricate inlays.
Oh, wow.
And wood carvers still using traditional hand planes and chisels on dense teak wood for temple restorations.
To achieve perfect symmetry and complex color chemistry without modern machinery, purely through ancestral memory, is profoundly impressive.
And the crucial takeaway here is that these artisans are not putting on historical reenactments for tourists. They are running vital, breathing economic engines. They're keeping a 600-year-old cultural legacy alive as a daily, profitable reality.
This brings us to the heavy part of our deep dive. Despite being an architectural and cultural marvel, this 600-year-old utopia is under severe threat. The reality is that nearly half of the original poles have already vanished entirely.
It's tragic, really.
And the ones that remain are in a desperate fight for survival.
The modern pressures on these spaces are just immense. The biggest initial blow is migration. Younger generations want modern amenities, so they move to the sprawling outer suburbs. The ancestral families leave, and maintaining these aging wooden havelis becomes astronomically expensive.
Because you can't just patch them up with a trip to the local hardware store.
Exactly. Authentic restoration requires highly specialized materials. For example, modern construction relies heavily on cement, right?
Sure.
But if you slap concrete onto a 600-year-old teak wood frame, the cement traps ambient moisture against the wood. It can't breathe, so it rots from the inside out within a few years.
Oh, that makes sense.
Authentic restoration requires traditional lime mortar, which is porous and breathes with the wood, allowing moisture to escape. Procuring lime mortar, seasoned teak, and the master carvers to shape it is a massive financial burden.
And then you have the clash of infrastructure. These branching alleys were brilliantly designed for pedestrians and maybe hand-pulled carts.
Yeah.
They physically cannot accommodate modern cars or emergency vehicles.
No, not at all.
When municipal governments try to forcefully upgrade the underground plumbing or sewage systems, the heavy machinery often cracks the foundations of the original architecture.
And climate change is accelerating the decay. More extreme temperature swings and heavier, unpredictable monsoons punish the exposed wooden facades. And of course, where there is decay, real estate developers immediately swoop in.
This is a deeply frustrating irony for anyone paying attention to modern urban design. Think about what is happening here. Developers are coming in and tearing down sustainable, climate-adapted, passive cooling wooden architecture that has successfully survived 600 brutal Indian monsoons.
Crazy.
And they are demolishing it just to build cheap, concrete apartment boxes that act as heat sinks, require massive air conditioning, and will likely crack and degrade in a fraction of that time.
It is the ultimate tension between heritage conservation and rapid modernization. The concrete block offers a quick fix for indoor plumbing and maybe parking, but it entirely destroys the neighborhood's microclimate and obliterates the shared Otla culture.
Is there any hope, or are they just doomed to be paved over?
Well, there is a silver lining. The hope for the Poles currently lies heavily with a younger generation of Gujaratis and community-led heritage organizations.
So they are stepping in to find a middle ground.
Right. They are buying back dilapidated havelis and finding ways to adapt them sustainably, turning them into boutique stays, community centers, or modernized homes that preserve the facade and the chalk, but integrate 21st century plumbing and solar power without destroying the teak frame.
That sounds like a monumental challenge. But really, understanding the poles of Ahmedabad is just scratching the surface of this region. The conservation instinct in this part of the world runs incredibly deep. Exploring the history of Gujarat state feels exactly like opening a historical nesting doll.
Oh, I like that. Unpack that analogy for us. What are the layers?
Well, think about a set of nesting dolls. You start with a massive, modern outer layer. In Gujarat, that would be the Statue of Unity.
Yes.
It's a 21st century engineering marvel. It is literally the world's tallest statue, standing 182 meters high, built to honor Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, the leader who unified over 500 princely states to help form the modern Indian Republic.
A towering modern achievement.
Right. So you open that outer modern doll, and inside you find a 19th century mega palace.
The Lakshmi Vilas Palace in Vadodara. Built in 1890, it remains the largest private dwelling built to date, roughly 4 times the size of Buckingham Palace, featuring this bizarre but beautiful fusion of Indian, Islamic, and European architectural styles.
Exactly. Then you open the palace, and you find the 600-year-old poles we've been talking about. You open the poles, and you go deeper underground to find the ancient stepwells.
And stepwells aren't just staircases to groundwater. They're essentially inverted subterranean temples. Look at Rani Ki Vav in Patan.
That one is stunning.
It descends 5 massive stories directly into the earth, lined with over 500 intricate sculptures of deities, or the Adelaj stepwell. They functioned as vital community water sources, yes, but the deep shade and the evaporation off the water table made them cool sanctuaries from the heat.
So you open the 1,000-year-old stepwell, and at the very center of this nesting doll, the tiny ancient core, you find the Indus Valley civilization.
Right, sites like Dhulavira and Lothal.
Proving that sophisticated urban planning, grid layouts, and advanced water conservation were happening right here 4,500 years ago.
It is an unparalleled cross-section of human endeavor. I mean, you can trace an unbroken arc from 4,500-year-old hydraulic engineering up through royal palaces to ancient community layouts, all the way to modern mega monuments.
It really is.
And what's truly remarkable is that this fierce instinct to protect and preserve isn't just limited to human architecture. It extends directly to nature.
Which brings us to the Gir forest.
Exactly. Gujarat applies the same protective ferocity to its wildlife. The Gir forest is the absolute last refuge on the planet for the Asiatic lion. Wow.
Due to aggressive long-term conservation efforts, there are now about 700 lions thriving there. It is the only place outside the continent of Africa where you can see lions roaming in the wild.
From a 600-year-old self-policing neighborhood to subterranean temples to wild lions, the scale of history preserved in Gujarat is just on another level.
It demands a different kind of respect.
Mm-hmm.
And, if we pull all of this back to where we started, to those branching maze-like streets and the shared courtyards of the poles, it leaves us with an urgent concept to consider.
What's that?
Well, we live in an era defined by digital isolation and hyper-individualism. We build these massive, sprawling neighborhoods where we barely even know the names of the people living 20 feet away from us.
We prioritize total independence over everything else. Right, so the question becomes, could the ancient architectural blueprint of the Poles like a physical design that actively forces human connection, that relies on shared spaces, and builds an environment where your neighbors are your safety net? Could that 600-year-old concept actually be the exact model that modern city planners need to study to fix our cities today?
A 15th century architectural cure for 21st century urban loneliness. That is definitely something to think about the next time you pull into your driveway. If you decide to travel to Ahmedabad, we have a recommendation. Five Senses Tours organizes tours across India which are immersive cultural experiences. You can email contact@fivesensestours.com. Note 5 is written as a numeral in contact@fivesensestours.com or WhatsApp to +919 845 677 446.